Hey there, this is Pete Pardo with Sea of Tranquility. Today is Thursday, May the 18th. Yeah, it's another sad day, and we're here to report and give a little tribute to Chris Cornell, dead today at the age of 52. Apparently, last night committed suicide just a few short hours after a Soundgarden concert in Detroit, Michigan. So, you know, for a lot of people, this one hurts quite a bit. I'm a little bit older, so, for me, the whole Seattle scene was not quite as impactful. But I know for a lot of folks who are, a decade or so younger than me, Soundgarden and Cornell was kind of like the voice of a generation. It's like you talk about a lot of the Seattle scene and what that meant to so many people. If you were like a rock fan, maybe a teenager, maybe your early 20s, in the early 90s or throughout that decade, you had Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Pearl Jam, and Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, all these bands kind of bursting on the scene. Some of whom burned out pretty quickly, right? But, Soundgarden kind of held on there for a while. And even when Soundgarden went away, Cornell kind of, he did some solo stuff. And then he hooked up with the Rage Against the Machine guys and did Audioslave, which was a really popular band as well. Maybe from an influential perspective, not quite as big as Soundgarden. But, those vocals of Cornell, that's the one thing I want to stress here. I'm going to come right out and say it. I was never a huge fan of any of the bands that Cornell was in. Temple of the Dog, this little project that he did with some guys from Pearl Jam, pretty good stuff, interesting. Not really my cup of tea. Soundgarden, liked them for a little bit. They had this kind of, for me anyway, this like 70s kind of doomy hard rock thing to some of their material, which I could relate to. And I think they had a lot in common with Alice in Chains. So for me, out of that whole Seattle scene, Alice in Chains and Soundgarden are probably the ones that I can still resonate with today, all these years later. But regardless of what I think about Soundgarden or Audioslave or Temple of the Dog, whether I listen to those bands or not really matters not today, because I think myself as a rock fan and a fan of talented musicians, I have always felt that Cornell was probably the greatest singer from that era of rock bands, whether it's Seattle or anywhere else, it really doesn't matter. He definitely was one of hard rock's best vocalists in the 90s. Even still today, you listen to some like recent recordings, Soundgarden has been on tour, right? They got back together a couple years ago, and it's a shame we didn't see a new album from them, but, they've been touring. He still sounds great. He sounded great on the Audioslave material. Whatever you think of Audioslave, they, like I said, they never quite hit those artistic peaks of either Soundgarden or Rage Against the Machine. But some good material there. And Cornell, great songwriter, incredible vocalist. There's a reason why, if you go online and go to the Chris Cornell Wikipedia page, why like Rolling Stone and all these other like magazines and websites, hail him as one of the top vocalists in hard rock and metal of the last X many years, right? He ranks pretty high. Higher than a lot of guys who we think as legends from like the 70s and the 80s. Cornell had this just commanding vocal presence. Always did. So again, what I'm going to say is, it doesn't really matter to me whether, to me, Soundgarden never really meant a hell of a lot, but I always thought he was an amazing vocalist. And this really sad thing is, I think one of the things that most people are having a hard time coming to grips with is, here's this guy who, amazing talent, beloved by millions, right? He's been very forthright with, his struggles with alcohol and drug addiction and problems in the past. apparently got through all that, okay, reunited with his mates in Soundgarden, and has been on, what we think is the clean and, focused vision going forward. He's got a wife and a couple of young kids, and just like that, has doing a tour. Great show in Detroit last night. He goes on Twitter afterwards, talks about what a great show it was, and how he's feeling great, looking forward to the rest of the tour. And just a couple hours later, he's gone. Apparently, and again, it's not 100% confirmed, but apparently, death by hanging, suicide. Again, we don't know what was going on in the mind of Chris Cornell. His wife has gone on today into the media and said that there were no signs, he wasn't acting depressed and all that kind of stuff, and there were no indications that he was going to do something like that. But you really don't know. Things that go on up here within an individual, a lot of times can be very private. Things can come to a head very, very quickly without warning. So we really don't know. Will we ever know? I don't. That's not for me to say. But I know there's a lot of people hurting out there today, and it's understandable because he was a great, great talent. So Soundgarden had, just to, and bear with me a second here, folks. I'm going to kind of look at some resources. But Louder Than Love, really great album. Bad Motor Finger and Super Unknown were kind of those albums that took Soundgarden into the stratosphere, right? And again, if you were a kind of a rock fan in the mid '90s, younger fan, sure. Older fan like me, they were one of those few bands that were kind of around during those years that said, okay, we embrace the past. And here you have this singer who's got this Plant meets Rogers, just amazing bluesy hard rock vocals. And as we speak, my wife is downstairs listening to the Zac Brown Band, and on their last album, he sang a guest vocal on one of their songs, the heaviest song on the album. This is pretty much a modern country band, and all of a sudden you hear this song, Heavy, I forget the name of the song. Heavy is the something, something, something. And, it's him, right? Elevates that song from whatever else Zac Brown Band is doing to this kind of like hard rock band, right? He had that ability, he just was a classy singer, always. Top-notch vocalist. And, so, I originally wasn't going to do this tribute tonight. I've had multiple people ask me, are you going to do a tribute to Chris Cornell? And, at first I was like, well, I don't know if I'm qualified because I'm not like a ravenous fan of any of the bands he was ever with. But the more I thought about it, it's like, but you know what? I've really always been a fan of him as a vocalist. Always have been. This guy was a major, major talent. So I said, you know what? Can't hurt to show my appreciation for everything he's done for music. And again, I'm going to say, I'll go right out and say it. To me, the 90s was, for me, a horrible decade for heavy music, okay? Because, again, old school guy, grew up listening to the heavy bands of the 70s and the 80s. 90s came along, a little weird for me. But I've always said that Soundgarden were one of the best of that decade, and this guy, Mr. Cornell, was head and shoulders probably the best vocalist of that entire era. And he still singing great up until just yesterday. So, it's you hate to see any talent lose their lives. And 52 is way too young. He was a year older than me. It's like, it's just really sad. So, Chris Cornell, millions will be missing you. This is, for a lot of people, this is going to hurt. And I can only say it's just a talent gone way too soon. And we can only wish our deepest condolences to the Cornell family and the millions of fans out there. And, he left behind him a good amount of musical legacy, which is fantastic. And, you know, a lot of people are going to be listening to Soundgarden and Audioslave and the bunch of Chris Cornell solo albums and all the various things that he appeared on over the years. But, you know, at 52, he probably had a good 10, 15, 20 years ahead of him of music to put out there. And it's really sad that whatever demons were bothering him, that, you know, he had to make the choice to end his life. It really is sad. And Chris, you're missed greatly, and you will be. A lot of people are hurting today and tomorrow and for the foreseeable future. But, you know, he's up there jamming with the greats right now. So Chris Cornell, rest in peace. This is Pete Pardo with Sea of Tranquility. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're here on YouTube. We're on Facebook and Twitter, all over the place, bringing you the best of heavy metal, all forms of metal, hard rock, progressive rock, classic rock, jazz, fusion, you name it. So, again, tribute to Chris. We'll miss you. Take care. Bye-bye.